Everyone, welcome back. So I will be watching Marvel's What If. Now, growing up, I really loved watching animation, whether it be, the animated movies, just cartoons, all those kinds of things. When it comes to Marvel in particular, I grew up on the 90s X-Men, Spider-Man, the animated series, even looking across the stream to the Batman Superman Adventures, Batman the Animated Series, Superman Adventures, Static Shock. Those are those things that I grew up upon. So, getting a new glimpse of Marvel's animation, they're looking into making their own studio. So I'm looking forward to seeing all the things that will be coming from that. I've also checked out some of their other more recent animated things like Earth's Mightiest Heroes, in addition to Avengers Assembled, the various different Spider-Man animated shows that have come out across the years, branch into the Hulk show a little bit. So I've gotten my dose of Marvel animated content. However, What If is a little bit different. So What If is looking at the ramifications that occurred after Loki's series, so I won't go into too much detail there, but if you haven't watched Loki yet, you should watch it. What If, Loki, WandaVision, Falcon, and Winter Soldier are all accessible on Disney+, so you could plug into those systems to take a look at those shows. But What If, we'll be taking a look at what if there were different changes that occurred. Usually, when we talk DC, we look at Elseworld stories and looking at different multiverses, what could happen. A very popular kind of Elseworld story in DC right now is Injustice. But Marvel is going to be looking at multiverses, so we're going to see this shown in What If, like if different choices were made, but also we'll be seeing some of these different multiversal ramifications in Spider-Man 3, No Way Home, and we'll also see some multiverse stuff in Doctor Strange 2, Multiverse of Madness, and we will see what comes next. But I haven't watched episode 1 yet, so that's what I'm going to go do. Then I'm going to come back here and talk to you about it. Alright, I have just watched What If episode 1, titled If Captain Carter Were the First Avengers. So some of the first comments that I'd like to make about it is, one, the animation was very clean, very fluid. Oftentimes when you see some animated things, they try to make them unique to the comics, but the characters that were presented here are visually, they look how the characters do look throughout the MCU. Recognized who people were based on their live-action counterparts. One thing I wanted to note is the Watcher, Uatu is his name, but, his beginning monologue talking about how one choice can make the difference, yada yada yada. It reminded me heavily of CW's version of their multiverse story, Crisis on Infinite Earths, where the Monitor was talking about the infinitude and all those things. So it's very similar and very parallel to what is going on, because multiverse seems to be the vibe right now across the different mediums and comics. What I liked in this episode, and I'm curious to see if it happens throughout the other ones, is that he pinpointed Uatu the Watcher pinpointed the specific moment when the branch happened or when the change happened. So in this case, it was when Peggy Carter decided to stay in the room, because in the MCU she decided to leave the room, or really that's what was expected of her due to the supposed woman role at the time. Something I thought was pretty cool was seeing how Peggy Carter utilized her shield a little bit differently than how we've seen Captain America do it throughout the MCU, utilizing it to stop cars, how she just used it in combat, and I'm curious if that's because she was actually trained as a soldier and had some combat training, so that was reflective on how she utilized her shield throughout the episode. One thing that I found a little bit weird was that we were calling her Captain Carter. Why not Captain Britain? just because that's where she's from, and there is a Captain Britain that is in Marvel Comics. So it'd be interesting to have seen that change because we don't call him, for the most part, Captain Rogers. He's Captain America. So I would have liked to see kind of that distinction with her character being called Captain Britain. I just think that makes it more like a superhero to me. Steve being now in this Iron Man prototype called the Hydra Stomper, was interesting. It was cool to see. I think it's fascinating when you think of something like that being made back in that time, because then when you think of how when you hit the MCU and you hit Iron Man 1 in particular, they talk about how the Stark stuff got weaponized, but what if Stark was making things like that way back then? How would that have changed society, warfare? They could have had a battalion of those Hydra Stompers in armies and utilizing them from there. How much would technology have changed by the time we hit the timeline of Iron Man 1 and things like that? So that's really interesting. Then we cut to this, montage of her fighting with, music of the era, and that was pretty cool to see. Very comic book, wham, bam. Very cool to see that. When Peggy was fighting in the sky, I thought that was a remarkable scene. That's one thing that I would say animation has the wonder of doing that live action does not, is how they show and utilize different fighting scenes and doing things that isn't physically possible with physical and live actors, actresses, is how they can show things in animation. And that's why I love animated things, and why oftentimes in movies you see them doing CGI, but it's awesome to see it in animation because it's consistent and fluid with the art style. But the way she was maneuvering through the helicopter, through the plane, breaking through it, skydiving almost, like floating there, and then landing back on the Hydra Stomper's back was pretty great, pretty cool. And what I also found really nice was seeing the interesting parallels, like when Bucky was falling off the train, she grabbed his arm, pulled him back up, and he was like, "You nearly ripped my arm off." Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The other line was, I think, Bucky to Steve, "You don't have to do this all day. I could do this all day." It's just nice to see some of those parallels throughout this show. But I'm looking forward to what's coming next when it comes to What If and just some of the different parallels. But I could easily see a reality where maybe this Peggy Carter, maybe it's not the last we see of her. But we'll find out. So thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace. God, Howard is so damn annoying. Her suit looks so cool. They should have just called her Captain Britain.